Part 0017. Can we hurry up here? I don't want to be in this costume any longer than I have to. Ludi's right. You're up, Takioto. I'm guessing you've already done your research on the place. I nodded. I had cleared this dungeon enough times to unlock all its CG, milk included. What else would you expect from an eroge aficionado? This floor had a clear blue sky without a cloud in sight. I took a deep breath while bathing in the warm sunshine, getting a whiff of earth and grass mingling together. Being greeted with weather like this in the morning would surely be the best possible wake-up call I could ask for. Unfortunately, we were all, save for one of us, warriors proceeding to the battlefield. Nanami seemed to be here to have a picnic. I mean, she was carrying a basket out of nowhere and everything. Are there any ways to counter the monsters here? I was planning on accepting all the damage and just running from them. Except now we have a lot more people, so clearing it normally might actually be the better way to avoid taking too much damage. I see. Also, the rules here are a bit unique. As more of your skin gets exposed from taking damage, your attack power actually increases. Oh, Her Royal Highness was looking disgusted. Meanwhile, Yukine placed her hand on her chin as she lapsed into thought. Master, you mentioned that we can damage our enemies by making sexy poses, yes? Is it safe to say that their attack power changes depending on the pose? Nanami asked. That's right. How do I put it? The more, on feeling to it, the better. I had absolutely no idea what the nonsense coming out of my mouth was supposed to mean, but it seemed to have gotten the point across to the other three. I get it. How agonizing to think about it like that. A double-edged sword. Very true. The enemy was weak to sexy poses. On top of that, we were dressed in titillating outfits, so our sexy poses would do even more damage. But from another angle, that would increase the mental damage we were dealing ourselves. An honest-to-goodness double-edged sword, just like Yukine said. It might be best to just bear the shame if we can defeat all the enemies with a single attack, right? Indeed. But the real big issue this time around was that taking too much damage meant producing breast milk. Physically speaking, however, this wouldn't harm anyone. If anything, it was actually healthy, since it created HP-recovering breast milk in the process. It is disappointing Miss Hatsumi and Miss Yuka aren't here, isn't it? Miss Ruija, too. Nanami had a point there. Sis did seem like she would have been a mighty warrior in this sort of dungeon. After all, she was the type to hand over her panties without a moment's hesitation. I got the feeling that Yuka would prove pretty strong herself, too, but Ms. Ruija was honestly an unknown quantity here. Quite a shame, yes, Master? Oh, I got it now. Nanami wasn't talking about their strength here. Sure, it was a bit disappointing they weren't around, but if there were even more people along for the ride, I don't think I could mentally withstand it all. There would probably be milk overflowing, except it wouldn't be coming from breasts, that's for sure. Oh my, it looks like we don't have any more time for jokes. At Nanami's comment, we all switched into battle mode. Appearing before us was a somewhat familiar monster silhouette. A female centaur. Centaurs were monsters that were part horse, part human, an extremely common sight to those who loved fantasy settings. They could run at great speeds on their strong legs, which they also used to deliver powerful kicks. Additionally, with the added stability of a four-legged lower body, they could carry heavy weapons that would be too much for normal humans to handle, even when making large swings. They were skilled at using both bows and spears and fought as balanced all-rounders. Basically, my point was that they were powerful opponents when you were up against them in normal battles. This monster may look like trouble, but this is a posing fight, I said, stepping forward to disgrace myself. Just then, someone stuck out their hand to stop me. I'll go, Takioto. No, as your upperclassman, I want you to let me go first. Don't worry, I've been training myself every day, too. I'm not going down easy. Yukine. Excuse me, just how badass could this beautiful woman get? Being who I am, I was able to get through this with just a love-struck heart attack, but if anyone else was in my place, their heart would have permanently stopped beating on the spot. That said, it was fair to say this training she mentioned wasn't going to be reflected in her moves in this dungeon. Yukine struck a pose, brandishing her naginata. If I was to give my personal assessment, I'd say that her form was so flawless it looked like it would befuddle anyone trying to attack her, giving the illusion that anything that entered her attack range would be cut down instantly. A simply beautiful pose. But given her bunny suit attire, her sexiness also came through just as strong. At this, green hearts, like masses of mana, appeared in front of her. They then flew in a direct line right at the centaur. The monster passively accepted the hard attack, which tore holes in her clothing, as if chunks had been bitten out of it. On, the centaur screamed. Looking at her again, why, it appeared the underboob her clothes were hiding had come out to play. Her underboob said hello like a shy young maiden hiding behind her mother, peeking out from behind to see what was going on. My, how they had grown. I replied with a hello of my own in my mind. I was dangerously close to saying it aloud. However, our opponent wasn't beaten yet. She propped up her ample bosom with her right arm, looking at us with upturned eyes. What happened when she did? Small yellow hearts appeared and flew straight at Yukain. She tried to slice through them with her naginata, but her weapon slipped through the projectiles as if cutting through fog, slashing the air. It appeared physical attacks couldn't erase them. The hearts hit Yukain, and her clothes flashed with light for a brief moment before they were torn slightly. Hiya, NGH. Ha ha. Oh, Yukain's voice nearly made me faint right on the spot. Actually, though, why were both the centaur and she letting out such titillating moans? I didn't remember hearing anything about that aspect of the system here. Likewise, Ludi gulped next to me. This was just a guess on my part, but a part of her must have thought this shitty dungeon system was all some big joke. Now that she could see it was for real, however, she stiffened up. Nanami didn't seem the least bit concerned. I'll do it this time, Ludi announced, stepping forward to get into position. She lifted one arm up to expose her armpit while placing her other hand on her stomach, a classic pose for a modern pinup model. Perhaps because she hadn't been through a sexy dungeon in a while, her embarrassment was winning out, and she stiffened her pose a little. But thanks to the sexiness of Ludi's exposed armpit, hearts slightly larger and redder than Yukain's appeared and shot through the air toward the centaur. The centaur took a direct hit, crying out as though it had made her feel good. But she still had a few scraps of clothing left over. But hold up. After how much her clothes had been torn off, why were her nipples still just barely being covered up? Her clothes had torn away like a late-night anime, just barely trying to keep things safe for broadcast. The centaur looked kinda peeved. I mean, I guess that was natural given that her outfit was in tatters. The way she was breathing sure was hot, though. Just then, the centaur struck the same pose it had against Yukain, and a yellow heart appeared once again and flew toward Ludi. Now it was Ludi's turn to have her clothes ripped up some. As she bashfully tried to cover up her exposed skin and let out an adorable scream, I engraved the sight and her beautiful voice into my memory. Damn it, how dare you do that to Yukain and Ludi? Master, get on all fours. While agonizing over what to do, I heard Nanami call from behind me. Why the hell was this maid stuffing rice balls into her basket? One of us was clearly in a world of her own here. After a brief second of worrying, I got on all fours. I didn't know if this would have any effect. After all, in the game, Iori never strikes any sexy poses of his own. What in the world was a guy's pose going to be good for? There was a time when I, too, thought this way. But my position had an effect, all right. However, why is it pitch black? I wonder why it looks so ominous. The heart that appeared in front of me was, simply put, murky black. Even the centaur, having meekly accepted all the attacks prior, seemed to be terrified of the projectile and took off on its powerful legs to escape. Nevertheless, the heart doggedly pursued behind it. It landed a direct hit, and the centaur lost her balance, a black mist rising from her outfit and the fabric turning ragged, as if it had been splashed with acid. Letting out an agonized cry, the centaur covered her breasts with both hands while falling to her knees where she stood. So, why was she in so much pain, exactly? She's certainly letting out a strange squeal and writhing around while she's doing it. Oh, now she's collapsed and stopped moving. It was just as Ludi said. The centaur's breathing was ragged, and sweat gushed from her every pore. Even then, she never took her hands from her chest. After that continued for about 10 seconds, there was a change in her. On times WYS times kappa. Suddenly, her voice grew seductive. I didn't know what language she was speaking, but I could clearly tell that she was pleading for it all to end. Then, looking at me with glassy eyes, she turned into magic particles and vanished. Both Yukine and Ludi were at a loss for words. I hadn't actually done anything bad, yet I felt intense guilt weigh on me and couldn't bring myself to look them in the eye. Just what sort of faces were they making? What face was I supposed to make here? I didn't have any clue at this point. Impressive as always, Master. I can't help but be awestruck by how your pose broke the enemy spirit. I would love to be hit with it myself, just once. It was Nanami who broke the silence. But was that really for the better? Maybe all the monsters, get like that after their clothes are gone. Don't let it bother you, okay? Yukine said before patting me on the shoulder. Then she changed the topic slightly, as if throwing me a life raft. I guess the power changes based on the strength and color of the heart? It seems that way, doesn't it? But why was Kusuk's the only one that, well, looked a bit sinister? But in her final moments, the centaur looked happier than anyone else in the world. A happy ending. All's well that ends well. The end. Was that really what was going on here? Anyway, putting that aside for a moment, our clothes got torn up. What do you say we try changing into one of the other outfits they gave us? Yukine and Ludi speculated. Want to try out a few? No, I believe it would not be prudent to challenge the dungeon's rules. There's a chance, particularly with these silly dungeons, that they have an equally silly punishment for such behavior. Though, many don't. For example, you might produce breast milk for the rest of your life. Let's shelve that idea then. Immediately. It was too dangerous. Way too dangerous. It appears we can't afford to take our time, Nanami murmured. Another centaur had shown up. I wanted to figure out what exactly was the deal with my abilities and went to attack again, but Nanami stepped out in front of me. Master, please leave this to me. Though I'm not certain, I believe I have a grasp on how this system works, she said, stepping forward and brimming with confidence. Why was she still carrying that basket, though? The centaur was the first to make a move. She whirled around on the spot and hoisted her spear straight up to the sky. It was the sort of post you'd see on the logo for the Olympics. When she did, what looked like a heart-shaped magic missile appeared in front of her and flew at Nanami. It was yellow and about the size of a person's head. Conversely, Nanami campily dropped something from her basket, then froze in the middle of picking it up. I see, so that's what the basket was for. Yukine nodded, impressed. I couldn't help admiring the move myself. This was powerful, all right. That instant, an enormous red heart that far outstripped the centaurs appeared and flew off toward the centaur. When the two hearts crashed into each other, the yellow heart was erased, and Nanami's heart slammed into her foe. What happened next was spectacular. The centaur's clothing quite literally flew off of her. It was far beyond fabric ripping in places to give some teasing peeks. Her outfit had been completely torn off. The centaur immediately covered her voluptuous breasts with her hands and stamped the ground as she looked at Nanami with frustration, letting out a lewd cry all the while, before she began transforming into magical particles. Realizing what we had gotten ourselves into, Ludi glared scornfully, as if calling the whole predicament ridiculous. Oh, she actually said, ridiculous out loud, too. Meanwhile, Yukine had her hand on her chin again and seemed to be thinking something over. Nanami had won out by showing a glimpse of her boobs from her stooped position, along with accentuating her thighs and butt. Her pose must have been so effective because it seemed accidentally arousing, like something that could happen in real life, rather than purposefully erotic. Indeed, she'd embodied an everyday, believable eroticism instead of an implausible sexiness. The fact that she was in a bunny suit that emphasized her beautiful butt and legs was another factor that deserved high marks. Well, that's all there is to it. I get it. I don't really want to, but I sort of understand how this system works now, Yukine said, a sorrowful expression coming to her face. It must have really sank in that the more pervy the pose, the more powerful. Doubt I'll forget about this day for a long time. That's true. I agreed as well. I sneaked a glance at Yukine's costume. It was unforgettable in all sorts of ways, and I'd keep the memory with me for the rest of my life. Even if I got amnesia, I was sure this memory would remain. Taking these two fights into account, our policy going forward was simply to run away. We would fight when it was absolutely necessary, but generally avoid combat where we could. Our skilled battling was a once-in-a-lifetime feast for the eyes. When we arrived at the last floor of the dungeon, Yukine and Ludi both ended up wounded all over. Asterisk, though physically, they were totally unharmed, and I had earned some emotional scars of my own, though they weren't nearly as bad as theirs. Meanwhile, Naonami was mysteriously unfazed by the whole experience. "We've arrived at last, by the looks of it," Naonami murmured, looking at the spatial magic circle. "Now it'll finally be over," Ludi said, as if she were spitting up the words from the pit of her stomach. But jumping into that circle likely isn't going to be the end of it. Better stay on guard. Yukine was right, there was still a boss to contend with. There were some floors in this dungeon that didn't have a boss at the end, but it was impossible to avoid taking a lot of damage on them. More importantly, I couldn't choose any of them and risk the others thinking those were the sorts of fetishes I was into. Man, I'd been so ready to dash through no matter how much damage I'd take at the start. "Here it comes," Yukine muttered. When we approached our end goal, the magic circle, the area at our feet began to glow. The transporter was enormous. The next moment, particles of light began gathering together from this magic circle of hitherto unseen size. Appearing from it were 2 carplins. These oft-ridiculed and derided monsters were lower than Dragon SD slimes or a magic pea that didn't know tackle. The 3 girls were surprised. Why carplins? But the answer was simple. They were the weakest of all monsters, and not only did they look completely ridiculous, but they also couldn't even swim despite their fish heads. These would be our sexy posing battle opponents. Without a doubt, Eroge players' brains would leak from their ears just imagining the heroine's anger at demeaning themselves and damaging their pride before these weaklings, along with their shame from the costumes and the poses, and being ever so slightly intoxicated from pleasure. Incidentally, there were some areas in this dungeon where goblins or orcs appeared at the end. They were classic monsters, in more ways than one, after all. Car. It didn't seem like things had really sunk in for Ludi and Yukine yet, but Naonami appeared to instantly recognize how troublesome these monsters would prove to be. "I can see a fierce battle ahead of us here. There's a chance even I might not make it out unscathed." The carplins were the first to make a move. One of the humanoids? Fishes? Creatures? Whatever sort of classification it fit, the strange monster turned its butt toward us and flipped up the worn-out rag covering it. Its smooth and surprisingly pretty buttocks was kind of infuriating. At this, the other carplin faced its compatriots, and raised its hand up into the air. Then it slapped its partner's cheeks over and over again with abandon. Not a butt drum. This is dire. "Quick, master. Take off your pants and get on all fours." Why exactly did Naonami have a riding crop in her hands? Okay, obviously that was going way too far. Oh crap. The hearts were already flying toward us. I immediately slammed into the large purple heart heading for our party. If Ludi or Yukine got hit, there would be no going back for them. It'd be all over in more ways than one. As I gritted my teeth through the assailing pleasure, a thought suddenly came to me. Given this was an Eroge world, I understood why the attacks would make Ludi and the others start to feel good, but why the hell did that feeling of pleasure extend to me, too? "Are you all right, master?" "No problem, I'm fine." There might have been a problem with my outfit though. I mean, just that last attack left me so ragged it was a wonder how my most precious place wasn't on full display. "Come on, Kasuk, you're in tatters." "You all right, Takioto?" That attack's trouble. Dealing with their combo attacks is annoying. Let's separate the 2 of them. "I'll take on one of them myself," Naonami said. Wait. Just how exactly was she going to lure one away? Right as the thought crossed my mind, Naonami threw a rock at one of the carplins. It stuck out its tongue at Naonami and was easily baited toward her. Ridiculous. Princess Ludi was observing it all with a downright polar look in her eyes. Takioto. Ludi. You both have to hurry too. We can't waste this chance Nanami has given us, Yukine said as she posed at the other remaining Carplin. Yet in a truly awful development, the Carplin widened its eyes and gawked right at her. Not only that, but the damn thing took a camera-looking item from its pocket too. HNGH, you dirty coward. Yukine froze in place, as if she were being stared down by a dragon. Though, in her defense, getting a camera pointed at you by a strange, leering, depraved creature. Yeah, that would make it real hard to strike a sexy pose, wouldn't it? How was Nanami doing? I looked over to find, for some reason, a school desk and chair, where she was standing with her hand raised. The Carplin had been hit with the enormous heart she produced and was moaning on the ground. At this point, I didn't understand anything that was going on with her. Noticing my gaze, she shouted, I sent for these, thinking this might come up. Come on, it was far weirder to actually expect something like this. When I looked back to the front, I saw Yukine striking a pose, although she seemed somewhat daunted. Ludi was making a pose of her own right next to her. Oh, the camera had a flash function, too. I wondered how much money I'd need to save up to get this Carplin to hand it over. The Carplin looked unfazed as it was hit with their heart. I immediately made my own pose, but the monster easily handled this attack as well. It was just wrapped up in tattered rags, so why was its defense so damn high? What were those things? Ratty tunic plus 99. Next, it was the Carplin's turn. The unbearable sight of the creature spreading its legs into an M shape produced a black and sinister heart that flew toward the three of us. Looks like I'm not gonna want to drink any milk in the near future. With that thought in the back of my mind, I stepped out in front of the group when Ludi and Yukine intercepted the attack for me. HNRGN, NNNH. Yukine. Ludi. FF Funbags. Oh, I almost just screamed out an Eroge title out of nowhere. Wait, no, that wasn't important here. They must have jumped out because they thought my clothes were at their limit. But the thing was, Yukine's and Ludi's outfits were at that same breaking point themselves. Ludi was hiding her chest with her arms, but her underboob was still out there for the world to see. I rushed over to the two as they teetered back and forth. It was like sweat had erupted from their every pore. I tried going up to catch them since they looked like they were about to collapse and discovered they were sticky all over. Then, for some bizarre reason, a heavenly smell of body odor, shampoo, and other feminine fragrances filled my nostrils. On top of that, I felt something soft and warm fall onto me. Yukine threw her arm over my shoulder and stretched her armpit open, but it smelled simply delightful. Also unable to stand on her feet, Ludi leaned onto me with all her body weight, and boy, was it soft. Where exactly was I right now? Heaven? Takioto, our attack power should be really high right now, yes? I nodded. They were so mighty I could barely keep my sense of self intact. Let's decide this here, they said before walking toward the Carplins. Their clothing was torn all over, and it seemed like their most private places could be exposed to the world at any moment. In other words, it was like they had the most powerful weapon of all in their hands. Conversely speaking, if things weren't settled here, it would be the end of the road for us. However, the merciless Carplin sent another attack our way. It turned its butt toward us and smacked it again. A black heart appeared. Yukine went to jump out in her shredded costume, but I pushed her aside. Then I looked at her and Ludi with a smile. My heart whispered to them both. Thank you. Kuyusuki. I collided with the Carplin's projectile. That instant, I felt a surge of pleasure, and then a sensation of mental and physical release welled up inside me. Let's go, Ludi. Avenge Takioto. Finding her resolve with Yukine's words, Ludi took both her hands away from hiding her skin. I looked at them both, experiencing what felt like a kind of post-nut clarity. Then a thought came to mind. I get it now. This is the world I'm in. If it were possible, this moment should have been engraved in a lithograph that would never weather away. The ultimate erotic moment that needed to be preserved as a several thousand-year legacy, worthy of being passed down for as long as humankind survived. Why look, there was Ludi, unable to fully hide her embarrassment or fully commit herself to her pose, along with Yukine, whose pose was also off due to the subtle look of shame on her face, despite her attempts to feign defiance and acceptance. The obscene harmony of their sexy yet half-hearted poses, along with their embarrassed expression and lewd bodies, was torture. It was going to burn me alive. Oh, how unbelievably, so very superbly sacred this sight was. In fact, it was so noble that even expressing it with words felt profane. The Carplin stared at them with a blank look, mouth agape, but slowly, its face dissolved into a smile. Our once mighty foe was dissolving into magic particles. Its camera fell on the ground where it had been standing. The Carplin must have attained its long-cherished desire. I mean, its smile was so serene it looked as if the Holy Mother, Mary, herself had blessed him with her love. Not that it was a surprise after witnessing such a sight. Honestly, I was feeling close to ascending to heaven myself, in every sense of the phrase. After a brief moment, Nanami, still unharmed, approached me. Master. We times two. Huh? Wasn't we already plural? Oh, no, she meant we 2 times. As in we. Oh, so she must have been referring to the 19th highest summit in Indiana, the 750-foot-tall Wee Hill. Yeah, that definitely wasn't it, was it? I immediately hid my crotch with my hands. Yukine drew close to me and, with a look of embarrassment mixed with remorse, covered me with a blanket. Then in a barely audible voice, she informed me. Takioto, well, take a look at your chest. I followed her gaze and stared down at my own chest. Yup, it was all over.